timeless light.
Greetings and welcome, everybody. This is Yochanan Elkemetic with the Entheogenic Roots podcast. And here we are with our third interview with the amazing, honorable guest, good friend of mine from way, way back in the day. We, in fact, go back to 91. Wow. I was 15 when we met. And we're going to share some amazing stories, reminisce, catch up, talk about what's going on, staying true to the vision of what Entheogenic Roots and the indigenous origins of the psychedelic culture is, highlighting our voices, bringing the conversation back to where it needs to be in this time that we're in, what they're calling a psychedelic renaissance, which, as I always say, didn't begin in the 60s. And here I have with me, I'm really honored and excited, elated to introduce to you Tony Moss, good friend of mine from way, way back. And it's been ages since we've been together and seen each other. So, yeah. I met Tony way back again when I was 15 in 91, down in Long Beach, where I'm from. And he actually opened up an amazing communal center coffee house. I would go there and, this is back in my days where I was studying a lot of comparative, mystical, traditional, religious, spiritual studies. Mm-hmm. I would go in there with my books, from the Quran to the Bible to Sufi teachings to Buddhist teachings, and sip tea and met Tony, other comrades that were there as well, we can call them. Sonny, I remember Sonny. Can't wait to see him again.
Yeah.
And it was called The Living Planet, and we'll talk about that. At The Living Planet, he was hosting these beautiful drum circles, and I think it's had to be like one of the first drum circles that I've ever attended. Yeah. And it's around the same time I picked up my first instrument, which was the guitar and the bass. And I was practicing acoustic guitar out there all the time. Me and my good friend Peter Delphs, in fact, who now has a coffee shop over on Carson in Long Beach called Eco Coffee. And it's been about 12 years now.
I had no idea.
And he's like, inspired by you and that whole era of time and everything.
Cool.
Doing music sessions and open mics, and he's got this beautiful sound system. And anyway, he's the one that introduced me to you and to everybody there and brought me to Living Planet for the first time.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. And so we were there, I don't know if it was like every Friday night, Saturday night.
Yeah, it was like every Thursday drum circle thing, yeah.
And we were there just religiously every Thursday. It was just so beautiful. And it was that time of life, being 15 at that age, it was so impressionable. And it really just like influenced me. And I wouldn't be who I am today without that major connection with you and everybody there.
Yeah, and it's the same for me, honestly.
Yeah. And so I had my son when I was 16. So a year later, I remember bringing him over.
Yeah.
And he was just an infant, and and even after, he was about 4 months old. We did a nice little photo shoot at one point.
Oh, yeah.
Remember that?
Oh, yeah. Very, very clearly.
Yeah. And I got those stills somewhere in storage somewhere.
Nice.
But we go way back. And I'm going to go ahead and let you introduce yourself and, what you do and what you share, fill in all the gaps. And, we'll just have a nice, natural conversation. Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, introductions are always weird, particularly since you know who I am. So, I move in the world predominantly as an artist, recording artist and visual artist. And around that same time period that we met, I got introduced through that whole scene to plant medicines, both conceptually and physically, got invited to actually participate. And as I was saying earlier, it just moved my life pretty dramatically into a whole new trajectory, it was about 10 years of study of plant medicines in the world of psychedelics, and eventually becoming a facilitator and definitely enthusiastic advocate, once you realize the power of them for healing and transformation.
Yeah.
And because the plant medicines are, of course, so rooted in indigenous culture, it just opened up this whole new world, of the recognition and understanding the value of indigenous cultures, indigenous ways, and in that study, you, of course, as you were saying, this beautiful study and inquiry into the world's religions and spiritual movements and philosophies, and So it just opened up this whole new chapter that's never stopped, basically. Yeah. One thing is for sure, you never could have told me back then that, I would be somebody that, would be a guest on podcasts or doing anything public about
Right.
these topics,
Yeah.
because I was such a novice at the time, and almost like embarrassed, like once the world opens up and you realize how much the ancients, our ancestors, knew already, and how many people have been carrying that knowledge, and part of you is like, how come nobody told me? It was kind of that
Yeah,
feeling at the
right.
time,
I can relate.
but that has since changed dramatically.
Right.
Yeah.
That's amazing because I recall one time I moved from Long Beach to Oregon back in '97, and it was around 2000. I went back to visit, and I was hanging out down for about 6 months. I was a part of this particular Sufi Sikh type of a fusion ashram that was in San Diego.
Oh, I remember that. Yeah.
Yeah, but I was staying over in Long Beach for a little bit. And one time you called me up. This is before texting, before cell phones and all this, you know. It's like the beginning of all that. But you called me and said, hey, put on all white, about to go up to LA and sit down with this mestre, drink some ayahuasca.
Yeah.
And that like shocked me because I thought I had to go to Peru or somewhere to get ayahuasca, you know.
Everybody did back then.
We were reading Shaman's Drum
Yeah.
and they so inspired by those stories and thinking that we had to go all the way down south. And I was like, oh, of course, I'm putting on all my white. I'm ready for this. We get there, you pick me up. We had a good friend with us, Lily, and that was so sweet.
Oh, yeah.
It was late at night. We pulled up to this, Russell's place, and he didn't have ayahuasca. He had a bowl of psilocybin mushrooms.
Yeah.
Remember that?
Oh, yeah.
And so he was like, we got there. We didn't know that when we got there. It was like, oh, I'm out of the brew, but here we have the mushrooms, and we could have the same ceremony, but we're taking mushrooms tonight.
Yeah.
You remember all that?
Yeah, and it was because ayahuasca was scarce at the time.
Right.
Wasn't consistent.
Of course. This is 2000.
Yeah. And I don't remember the circumstances, but somehow he wasn't able to get it. Like it didn't come through. He's like, well, we'll just do this instead.
Yeah.
And as you remember, it's like equally profound.
It was. It was such an amazing, beautiful, and amusing
For sure.
night. I remember that. It was so beautiful. I just want to say too, like I wouldn't even have, like if you come to my space, you guys have been to my space, talking to my cameraman and director here. The way that I decorate my space comes from Tony.
Really?
Yes, I remember going to your place. I was on tour with my band, and I was just so impressed at the way you had the aesthetics of your home. It was
Oh, I
just
don't
so,
even remember, but yeah.
all
in
the
Long
beautiful
Beach.
statues, in Long Beach, and
Oh,
plants
yeah,
and
yeah.
everything. And so the reason why I actually decorate my place the way it is because of this man right here. So thank you for that influence. And there's so many things we can talk about a lot, as far as how you've actually impacted my life in so many ways. You know?
It's so. I mean, we all do that, and it's always fascinating to hear, And now that I'm in this place now of within my community as being recognized more of an elder, one of the things is really that blows me away consistently is what you just said, is finding out that something that I might say off the cuff in some conversation for somebody else actually like lands like a profound moment.
Right.
And or just my way of being, and being around people. And you start to actually become very, not subconscious, but I would say self-aware of the impact that you're having on other people. And of course we all do. And the more aware you are of that, I think it's the more beautiful you can like walk in life, knowing that when you meet people, you're actually impacting them beyond what you know.
Yeah.
Because I've had people share with me things like you just shared, and I'm just like, what?
I
Yeah, I
know.
had no idea.
That's amazing.
Because I'm just busy doing me. Obviously.
Exactly. No, you planted some major seeds. And here we are. This is like a fruit of a seed that was planted years ago. Yeah. And let's unpack a little bit more and, peel the layers back as to how your experience has been in the entheogenic culture and what you've seen and what your perspectives are and how it's all developing now.
Huge conversation. So I think first, just some broad strokes. I first would say that having been in the world of plant medicines, entheogens, and psychedelics for 30 years now, on one hand, it's really rewarding to see it hit mainstream.
Right.
And not in the ways that are obviously negative, the commercialization. Ayahuasca meets capitalism and colonialism. Well, we met that many years ago,
Of course.
decades. But the awareness now that people no longer see it as some weird thing that hippies are doing in the back room or burnouts, people are actually recognizing the benefits, the health benefits, the spiritual benefits, psychotherapeutic benefits. Yeah, just to see so many different people from all walks of life re-acknowledging or returning to indigenous knowledge, basically. Yeah, and the technologies of healing and transformations that plant medicines offer. That's been really like beautiful. Yeah. And at the same time, obviously, it is plant medicine, indigenous culture meets capitalism, right? And I'm not a capitalist bashing kind of a person. We're never talking about capitalism as a concept. We're talking about capitalism as it actually is lived and practiced in the way we all,
Right.
interact with it. And yeah, and in a nutshell, it's like, everything is commodified and reduced to its monetary value,
Right.
basically. And it only is perceived of having value if someone somewhere along the way at the top or along the supply chain is making money on it. Right. So we're also in this interesting time with what is being called the psychedelic renaissance. It is for some people, I think, in a lot of ways, but even that is basically just turned into a marketing,
Right.
campaign.
Yeah.
There's a lot of amazing people doing beautiful works through organizations like MAPS and so forth, not downing that. And at the same time, the conversation that most of us are having that have been in this space for a while is, wow, we've been pushing and working for this for so long, for these ways and for the plant medicines and psychedelics to meet their equilibrium within our culture, to be recognized for their benefits. And it's kind of like after all that work, the minute it gets there, it's like, thank you guys for doing the work. We'll take it over now.
That's what it feels like, right?
And we'll sell it back to you. At
Exactly.
profit.
Right. Yeah. Colonial capitalism.
Yeah.
And it's just completely neo-colonialism. It's still working in its full, greased wheel type of a way.
Yeah, it just reminds me of, this, it's a ongoing, story, but it's like anthropologists or botanists going to South America and discovering ayahuasca.
Right.
And then giving it a name as if it didn't have one.
Exactly.
And as if it hadn't been discovered.
Right. Yeah. There has to be an approving stamp of the white coat that can validate it and say, okay, now, yeah, we can say they were right all these thousands of years.
Right.
But
And
until
even
now,
though-
you have to accept it,
Exactly. And even though it has proven multiple benefits for, a large part of the population, the only reason we haven't seen that, probably to its credit, be capitalized on, by multinational corporations or pharmaceutical companies is that they can't really quantify it. It's not like you can't take ayahuasca and put it into a pill,
Right.
although they claim to have an ayahuasca pill.
I didn't hear that. Wow.
The analogs, yeah. And you can't really control the dosage as you could with something like MDMA. Like, this is exactly what MDMA is,
Right.
and this is what we know this many milligrams does. You can't do that with ayahuasca. To its credit and detriment, I say mostly to its credit because you can't separate indigenous medicines from the ceremony and the tradition if you want the full benefit of the technology and the transformation and healing, benefits from it. And just because I have more experience with it than the others, that is particularly true of ayahuasca. They've tried. It's like, give someone ayahuasca, put them in an MRI, and watch their brain, and oh, okay, we see what it's doing. It's like, no, you don't actually. And they know that, right?
Exactly.
It's like, well, you need the music present, you need the setting, you need the community, you need the facilitator, curandero or shaman, however you refer to it.
Right.
All of those things working in synergy is why ayahuasca is so powerful.
Exactly.
Right. So, yeah, then we definitely have, indigenous medicine and knowledge up against capitalism, and colonialism. It's like, I've often looked at this, many people have talked about it. Something I'm sure we'll get into is this concept of right relationship, and particularly right relationship with plant medicines. If you were in right relationship with something like cannabis, powerful ally, right? Yeah, really beneficial, has a lot of benefits, and can really help you in moments when you need it. And like all the plant medicines, the dark side is that when you abuse it, you just have lethargy and you can't motivate yourself and,
Shuts the
handle
channels
business.
down, makes you lethargic.
So all of them are the same. It's like you have the beautiful plant coca, from South America. And what do? Extract just parts of it, not the entire plant. And then you get cocaine and addiction and people ruining their lives over, right? What I call a really stupid high, actually. Yeah, so it's the same for all the plant medicines. If you try to isolate
tobacco,
well, tobacco is like, I think, one of the most profound examples.
right?
We have people all over the world, like in South America, smoking mapacho, a wild form of tobacco that they don't inhale, by the way. And these 86-year-old, curanderos smoking mapacho in ceremony don't have cancer, lung cancer, right? Healthy, but when
not addicted,
exactly. Right, but when that is extrapolated from its source, kind of isolated and then manipulated to basically create cigarettes that are kind of designed to get you addicted, then you get cancer. Yeah, so this concept of right relationship is something that I talk about often. The reality of it is that even if you're grabbing coffee in the morning or your green tea, that's a plant medicine.
Exactly.
Right? So if you're conscious and it's like, oh, what my body needs right now is such and such, coffee is the plant medicine for this moment. Right? Yeah, and if not, then you're just running on coffee all day, burning out your adrenals, right? Yeah, and can't function without it. So bringing that back to ayahuasca, early on, I was just working with ayahuasca because it was life transforming for me personally.
Of course, yeah.
I wasn't really cognizing it in context of it being an indigenous, kind of heritage, right? And I also got introduced through the Santo Daime, which is a Judeo-Christian ayahuasca church out of Brazil. And it took a while, to kind of cognize, oh, wait, this is actually from indigenous people.
Yeah.
And there's a whole cosmology and culture and history, that comes along with this medicine. I want to know what that is. And that's when I took off and started studying all those things.
The Daime is an interesting access point, with all of their Christian iconography.
Yeah,
and chants, and they're beautiful songs and beautiful way to engage.
Yeah, and the Santo Daime is interesting for that. One of the things I love about it is that if you are attracted to or are kind of oriented and conditioned around organized religion, but you're interested in plant medicine as well, Santo Daime is great, right? Yeah, because you're going to get to drink ayahuasca, which they call daime, but also you have the very familiar comforting Jesus, Mary, and Joseph, and the hymns and the prayers, and then maybe 15 hymns in, they're also singing about some indigenous kind of more esoteric
elemental spirits and all these things.
Yeah, and they mix in kind of the, candomblé, and so it's syncretic. And that's what's beautiful about it. It really nothing is refused in the Daime. Right. Everything's kind of welcome as long as it kind of fits in within the doctrine, they call it.
Yeah.
So for me at the time, it was a really good introduction because I was very conservative, and it was like the first time I took LSD, I was tricked into it. I didn't do it voluntarily and would not have.
Right? Oh my goodness.
Yeah, it just would not have been on my radar. If I had been at a gathering and somebody said, "Hey, you want some LSD?" I'm like, "Hell no, that's with no LSD." So what happened is I went to a drum circle with a group of friends, and lo and behold, the guy there, who later becoming a really good friend, he was serving us ginseng tea and had dosed it with LSD, and we didn't know, which is never do that.
Never do that. Yeah, that's
However, in my case and the friends that were there, it was actually perfect.
It was beneficial.
Yeah, it was one of those nights that literally changed everything.
Yeah.
Right? It's like a lot of people reported, it's I was hearing music different, almost for the first time. And
side note, when we met, I was probably on about at least 2 or 3 hits of LSD, at every drum circle.
Oh, funny, yeah.
I discovered it back then, and I loved it. I was like, oh my goodness.
We'll get into that, because that scene ended up being monumental, what was going on with those drum circles.
Yeah.
So actually we'll segue into that.
Okay.
So midway through the drum circle, I remember thinking okay, we had some cannabis, so I'm drumming for the first time. Something you don't know you're in LSD. So this funny moment when I was smiling, holy smokes, this pot is so good. I mean, it's really good.
What is this?
Yeah, and then and I remember one of my friends was on the middle of the floor, flying like a butterfly. I was like, she's feeling it too, and we're all together. Right?
That ginseng tea is serious.
Right? And the funny thing is, because he didn't tell us, I remember I kept kind of sneaking back to the kitchen and having more ginseng tea. So long story short, at some point the guy who was hosting starts cracking up laughing, and it took us a while to realize what he was saying because he was laughing. And finally we made out that he was saying, "I spiked the tea." But I still didn't know what it meant. And then finally oh, you put LSD in the tea, right? But I was not mad at him at that point because we were having the best night of our
You're like,
lives.
thank you.
But it was comforting to know, like, okay, I'm not crazy. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, and this is why we're all in together.
Like
Yeah, so
the next tea that you drink is not going to make that effect, you know, like.
yeah, exactly, right? So that Living Planet was already open by the time that happened, but the drumming scene and all that had not happened. Like, I was way more concerned with it being, it was the first all organic coffee house in Long Beach, and to some degree in Southern California.
Right.
And
Pioneer in the movement.
yeah, and we had no idea we were. I mean, we were just doing what seemed natural for us.
Yeah.
I was really involved in the environmental movement at the time.
Right.
So the reason we opened the organic coffee house was, you know, for those
Living
reasons.
Planet,
It's like
I remember
organic
that.
coffee. That's why we called it Living Planet.
Exactly.
The kind of transformational and spiritual component of that came in concert with that LSD trip and with ayahuasca. And they were about 6 months apart, I think. So, yeah, where I was kind of hesitant about the drum circle before, I remember Sonny asking me about it, and I was like, I don't know, like, we're gonna have a lot of these hippie kids coming, and it's gonna like scare away our customers, you know. Then we do LSD, I'm like, bring everybody in.
Yeah.
We're doing this thing.
Activate the community. Yes.
And it was the best decision ever. So that, as you remember, it went fairly quickly from being 5, 10, 20 people in the actual coffee house or the drum circle to 80 people in the actual coffee house and another 100 in the parking lot,
Yes.
doing this whole like Grateful Dead scene thing that was happening. And yeah, it turned out to be we had no idea. We were kind of the fulcrum of this like alternative. It was like a renaissance of the 60s happening.
It was.
Every
Yeah.
Thursday. Yeah.
Remember Lewis?
Oh,
The Dead
yeah,
Alphabet? Yeah, he introduced me to the Dead there.
Yeah.
He had the tapes and everything in his car, always playing the Dead. And we were like, whoa, okay, this is a whole new other countercultural stream of
It really
consciousness
was,
going
and
on.
you know, it was strange to be. I wouldn't say I was the leader of that by any means, but I definitely was a facilitator in that it was
were
happening at our
completely.
space, and I was kind of ushering it,
Of course.
you know, in to some degree.
Yeah.
And having the same experience, you know, like I got turned on to so many things that would end up playing major roles in my life as I moved on. I mean, things at the time that were, you know, novel. It was like the I Ching, Rumi,
Yeah.
you know, these various spiritual philosophies and traditions. People started doing like workshops, you know, on the Kabbalah, and like all these. I'm like, what is all this stuff, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, so the 3 years that was open was like this crucible, it's like this incubator. And not only did it forge these friendships that would last, you know, a lifetime, it turns out. Yeah, it really put my life in this direction that I would not have foreseen or would have chosen, but I'm so incredibly grateful for it.
It was an amazing time. You mentioned the Kabbalah. I met my Kabbalistic teacher there, who ended up opening up a
interesting.
reggae shop down on Broadway, Third and
Oh, yeah,
Broadway.
yeah, yeah.
And he actually became, he revealed that he was a follower of Yahweh Ben Yahweh, that whole movement. But I was born with the name John,
Right,
and you probably met me as John, but he gave me the name Yochanan.
right. I
Telling
remember
me
yeah.
that, yeah, my name
Yeah, I
is,
always think of you as Yochanan
Yeah,
from
yeah.
the time you changed it.
Exactly, yeah. He said Yochanan is John in Hebrew. That's your real name. And I was like hesitant to even like introduce myself as that because I'm like, what is Yochanan?
Right.
But it's been that way ever since. Everybody knows me as
Yeah.
that. But it all began right there, just to bring it back full circle.
Yeah, yeah, you know,
Amazing.
so everything took off from that place. And I would say, you know, at least all of the people that I actually really bonded with during that time period, we're all still friends. Yeah.
That's so
And all of them, and you know, musically too, I had been doing music like musical theater, very kind of conservative, more mainstream music at the time. And during that time period, it was so like expansive and we were exploring. You know, I met Miranda and Sonny and all those folks, and you know, we took from the drum circles. Well, two things happened. We brought in Jai Uttal. Remember, it was his first performance, I think.
He's playing, in fact, this weekend.
Oh yeah.
I'm
Yeah, I
gonna
saw
check
it.
him out. Yeah.
That was major because we got to hear. I feel like of any other term for it at the time for us, it was like this, both traditional and contemporary spiritual music,
Right.
but played with, you know, musical expertise, right?
Yes.
And we were just like so inspired.
I remember that.
Right? So we met Sonia, Draculich there, Cyrus, Quid, all these folks, and we started to like kind of play music together and write songs, and that's what led into, I mean, me being a recording artist now and the kind of work that I'm doing, the music that we recorded at Miranda, what Sonia Drakulich is doing, Sonny's music, all of it happened during that time period.
Yeah.
It's where we all met and kind of got turned on. Yeah, and
Amazing.
the other and it was Lane Redman. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, we hosted Lane Redman there. She's a world famous frame drummer, just since
Yes.
passed away.
Yes.
Yeah, she had a workshop there, introduced us to the frame drum, which you brought up earlier. And I can't explain it. It was like, it was going from just the free-for-all kind of liberation of the drum circle to the actual refinement of like, this is what rhythm can do.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And as a meditation and kind of point of like self-inquiry, in addition to, more refined, I would say, relationship with rhythm itself, it's also kind of a spiritual tool. Yeah, so, that time period put everything else into motion.
It did. Those are the major milestones of life for many of us. And it's amazing how those ripples go out and they affect and touch so many people and cause a lot of revolutions to take place. And I feel that there's a network, the mycelia network we can always refer to, that goes and makes these connections. And I want to really just emphasize, people should know that, I'm sitting with an elder here, somebody that really, not only just an elder in the entheogenic culture, but in the actual Black, melanated diaspora. And then, fast forward till now, because see, as I'm sure we can relate, being in the alternative culture, counterculture, especially in the plant medicine and entheogenic culture, coming up back when I was partaking of LSD and introduced to psilocybin at 15 and all these things, and even fast forward to ayahuasca, it was 2002 where I had my first ceremony in Kauai. I would always be the only melanated person in the circles for years and years and years. And I've been telling everybody now, because there's a big resurgence of, because we know back in the 60s, there was a bunch of others as well.
Yeah.
Jimi Hendrix is the main poster, child of all that. But it has always been something that has been suppressed and even like consciously repressed. Like nobody wants to, in our community, because of the war on drugs that took place in the 80s during the Reagan era and all these things. And a lot of our people didn't want anything to do with psychedelics. And it has always been reserved to, this is just the hippie white man's thing. Like, this is not for us. But come to find out, it's like, no, really, this is what our people have been doing for thousands of years. We're just being reintroduced to it.
Yeah.
But now, fast forward, we're about to be at a ceremony with some people over in Atlanta where it's the majority out there is melanated people. And I'm connecting with so many people because of this project that I'm doing.
Yeah.
That is our people that are now involved. And I tell people that I've been waiting for years. Sitting back, when I had my first cup, I was told, bring this to your family and to your community and to your people.
Absolutely.
And I thought it was going to happen like next week, in 2 years, 3 years. But no, it took all this time.
Yeah, from the time that I mean, 3 decades.
Yeah, you see?
But,
so what has your experience been like? Just like,
similar to yours in the early days, Santo Daime, I was more often than not the only Black person in the room. And then little by little, it kind of started like trickling in. I remember this one beautiful sister, Jade, Jaji, came to a ceremony for the first time, and I remember looking across the room, we caught eye at the same time. She's a beautiful, dark-skinned girl, and we were like, hey, we're here. That has shifted completely. Yeah. Now, in most of the ceremonial and psychedelic spaces that I go into, there's lots of people of color. I mean, and now there's as you brought up, there are ceremonies of everything from wachuma to mushrooms, ayahuasca, all Black, right? And there's a couple of groups out of the Bay Area that actually take groups of all Black people to friggin' work with the Yawanawa, right? In the Brazilian Amazon. That would have been unheard of, right? Even 20 years ago.
Completely.
Yeah, so to see this happening is like really exciting. And the main reason for me, is something we'll drop into it now. For any culture, first of all people alive at this point, with rare exception, have some history of trauma, right?
Yeah.
And obviously, I'll just speak for our people, you know. African American people or people of the African diaspora, you know, we carry trauma in our DNA, right? This is like scientifically proven. The indigenous peoples early on were saying that you can heal your ancestors through working with ayahuasca.
Yeah.
And I remember early on hearing that, like, okay, like metaphorically. It's like, no, really, right?
Right.
Yeah, so one of the big shifts is that this idea that drugs are bad for our people, and because we know they tore apart our communities, you know, 60s, 70s and onward. Now there's enough education where people can separate the difference between drugs and plant medicines, entheogens, psychedelics.
Yeah.
And they're recognizing the healing power of it, and they're also recognizing that there is something to be healed, right? Not just like physical ailments, not just depression and anxiety, but going to the actual root causes of all of it. And most of it is in our DNA. It does have to do with generational trauma and just baggage and shit that has been passed on. And that's one of the things that ayahuasca is like phenomenally, consistently successful at healing, bringing up to be looked at, you know? Yeah, so I think that is part of the attraction now for people of color. It's not only a reclaiming of something that is part of our heritage anyway, it's also realizing that it's timely, you know,
Yes.
that this is a medicine that can actually help us arrive and meet this moment.
True.
Yeah,
So true.
yeah, absolutely.
It's amazing. I want to bring it to a personal level of what we both can relate on is the loss of our mothers.
Yeah, yeah.
I remember your mother Joy back in the day.
Joyce.
Joyce,
Which
yeah.
later became Rejoice. She legally changed it because
Rejoice.
everybody called her Rejoice.
Yes.
Yeah.
I remember having her food. She had that one little spot down there on 4th Street
Oh,
back in the day.
Mossville.
Yes, Mossville. And I lost my mother in 2002, and it was directly after that I went to Kauai and was introduced to ayahuasca.
Yeah.
And did some profound,
Just a really
deep.
beautiful time to work with that medicine.
It was perfect. It was right in alignment. I didn't even know it was going to happen. It was an amazing synchronistic, serendipitous thing that took place right after my mother passed. And the grandmother, ayahuasca, held me, comforted me, allowed me to grieve deeply and really understand on a profound level what death is.
Yeah, right.
And we know losing your mother, that's like the most intimate experience of somebody of a loss that you can have. I mean, we were crafted in her womb.
Yeah.
And so, how has that experience been for you, like with the mother ayahuasca and reconciling your grief?
Fortunate. So, two things converged that made that experience for me not only transformational, but easy compared to other people. One was that my mother was like good with Jesus, right? And what I mean by that was she had no fear of death. We would talk about it openly, you know, often. And she was completely convinced of an afterlife, that she was leading a good life, and that she would be taken care of. So there wasn't like this weird taboo energy around the idea of death in our conversations. Also, by the time she passed away, which was in 2012, I had been working with ayahuasca for quite some time and was actually facilitating by then. So I just had this completely, you know, transformed relationship with death and whatever that is, ultimately. So to some degree, I wasn't prepared for it. It was a heart attack. It was kind of like, what? You know, I remember my cousin calling me, like, you know, whenever you get that phone ring at 3 o'clock, you're like,
yeah,
right? And I remember the phone ringing and me literally saying to myself, my life is about to change forever. I just knew this was going to be one of those calls.
Wow.
And my cousin didn't know how else to say it. And I appreciated, you know, she's like, well, there's no reason to like fool around with this. So she goes, your mother passed. It was just like that.
Yeah.
And like everybody, I just said, what? It took my brain a minute to like, you know, but really within like 2 or 3 minutes, it was like, okay, like, and what I remember distinctly was, one of the things she had said to my brother and I often was, you know, I don't want to like have this long and drawn out, and I don't want to suffer. I also don't want to be a burden. I just want to go.
Yeah.
Right.
Wow.
And I'm good. And when you know, she had a heart attack in her car. And the funny thing is, she was out thrift store shopping, which was her favorite thing to do. She and her sisters every weekend. Whenever I would go and visit, it would always be the same. Wake up in the morning, have breakfast. Then we go shopping at the thrift store, T-Town in Oakland, right? And then we come back and watch like Oprah and home improvement shows. Like, and I just loved it. That was our thing.
Yeah.
So I remember at her memorial service, one of her best friends, you know, everybody's kind of feeling solemn. My mom was very clear. I want it to be a party. I don't want no like, you know. So her friend gets up and she goes, well, she shopped till she dropped. And it was a perfect thing to say because everybody fell out laughing. And it was true, you know. So the interesting thing, I'm giving a little preface why I was sharing that is, I had to like fly to Oakland, handle her quote unquote estate, you know, get her house in order, handle, you know, all the things you need to do when people pass away. And then, you know, managing all the family and like who gets what and like all this stuff. And I think I was there maybe 2 weeks handling that. And then I had to come back for this very big ceremony that was taking place. And so there wasn't really, if I even needed to grieve, I wasn't aware of it. I was just too busy handling stuff. So, and I remember thinking like, well, I'll take care of this part of things when I get to the ceremony. And sure enough, this amazing funny moment happened when I did the first ayahuasca monologue, which was just an online thing on YouTube. I remember my only trepidation was, oh, if I do this thing, my mom's gonna find out and I'll be outed that I'm doing ayahuasca. But then I thought, wait a minute, she'll never see this, right? So I go ahead and film the thing. A month later, they contact me, oh, the ayahuasca monologues are up, it's on YouTube. And I remember watching it and like, oh, okay, that's really cool. I kid you not, the next friggin' day, my mother calls me up. I just saw you on this, what's this thing called? And I was like, how did you find that? She goes, well, I was looking for one of your music videos. I was like, oh, of course, right? The algorithms outed me.
Right.
So the cool thing is, I was like preparing to be like, let have it. And instead she goes, I want to do it. And I was like, Mom, you don't want to do ayahuasca. You just think you do, right? You don't really know what it is. So we kind of talked about it and it just never came up again. So she passes away. I handle her estate. I'm at this big ayahuasca ceremony and she shows up. And I'll never forget it. It's like she leans in and she goes, now I can come to every ceremony I want.
Wow.
And she has ever since.
Oh my goodness. That is so beautiful.
It was very beautiful.
Such a lovely story.
So she's with me all the time. And you know, people that knew her, you know, like you're looking at her. You know,
course,
like,
of course.
Yeah, I'm very much an embodiment of her.
You are.
Not as much my father, but just my mom and I were closer, but I carry a lot of him too. But my mom and I were just like, to some degree, it was quite literally like a huge part of her transferred into me. And not only the music, but just her way of being in the world, the way she is with people, you know, the things she cared about. Not just like she taught them to me. They're like just a part
They're
of...
embedded. We're extensions of our mothers. I can relate to that completely.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm bringing that back to ayahuasca, you know, because you asked about that. The ayahuasca is predominantly cross-culturally perceived of and experienced as feminine.
Right.
And in most cultures, they refer to it as Divine Mother. Not all. Like in Ecuador, they actually perceive it as masculine, which is really interesting.
Interesting,
Yeah. But overall, it's all the mother, Divine Mother, Divine Mother. And because it's from the jungle, right, you're drinking this plant medicine, and somehow through this alchemical, you know, process we don't fully understand, it is, you drink ayahuasca and it's like nature, the mother, Gaia, has found a way to commune with you and communicate with you through this plant medicine. So it's this phenomenal technology. It is also mysterious, you know, mysterious and like esotericism mysterious. So that relationship with the mother and then having my relationship with my own mother kind of merge into that space. It feels like in every ceremony that I go to, I'm quite literally like with the mother, and my mother.
Indeed. I have the same exact experience. Yeah, just having those intimate connections, and again, being crafted on a mother's womb, we are completely like the carbon copy, just released, freed up out of them, and as the extension living in the world.
And as you know, just not to interrupt, but the thing I think is so profound that a lot of people still don't understand is when you're in the womb, you're experiencing life through your mother still.
Exactly.
All the songs, the hurts, the pains, the highs, all of it. Like, so you come into the world already with your mother's experience, right, to some degree.
Straight up. I had this beautiful memory that came back last night. I was sharing it with Jesse about how when I was young, you know, my mother had 6 of us. And I was the only boy out of 5 sisters. And out of 6 of us, I had 5 sisters. There was times where, you know, she couldn't always give us that one-on-one attention. And so I remember being 5, 6, and 7 and taking myself back to being in her womb
Yeah.
and listening to her voice from within
Oh, wow.
and her heartbeat. That would be my meditation.
That's beautiful.
And I would be in my room on my own and just listen to that and comfort myself. That's the way I would self-comfort and regulate. And I just shared that memory last night. It was like so amazing. And we have that ability. Like we were there, like you just mentioned.
Yeah, Miranda has often, I don't remember exactly how she shares it, but when she introduces a frame drum to a new group of people, and sometimes in performance, she'll talk about this idea that the first sound we ever hear and how we kind of attune ourselves to is the sound of your mother's heartbeat. In the womb.
Exactly.
Yeah, this rush of the blood moving. And so we grow up in the room already with this sense of life as rhythm. Yeah,
That's
and
so true.
pulsation. Yeah.
Right. And so bringing it back into the modern context of where we're at and what we're seeing with entheogens becoming more popular, and the psychedelic movement being revolutionized again. In my perspective, I'm seeing a lot of bypassing as to acknowledging the traditions, especially in the mainstream, of course. And we see, I'll say completely, Michael Pollan going out making these beautiful documentaries that are introducing a broad, group of people to something that's new to them. And then just like I see him just brushing over a little bit about, the indigenous connection, but not really diving in and peeling the layers back as much as it could, as it could. And I'm just curious as to like some of the detriments of that. And if we were to call on the elders of this day and age, like, what do you think they would actually say? What would they offer to us? And, and how to course correct where this is going?
First, I'll first say that I have great respect for Michael Pollan and his work. And for the reasons that you brought up, he's a very knowledgeable mainstream author that a lot of people look to for answers, right? And he's aware of that. I've seen him interviewed. And he said something like, I know that I'm the person in the room that people look to for answers. And he's also very smart, and he's aware that if he was going to introduce psychedelics to a mainstream audience, his audience, I actually thought he made really good choices in terms of how to introduce it. It's kind of like 101, and it is in depth relatively. And it was more like an invitation. It's like, you don't need to be scared of these things. This is what's happening. Here's my own experience. I've done it myself.
Right.
And if you're interested and want to dive deeper, it's open for you. I felt like he kind of went as far as he probably could or should have,
Right,
relative to who he is.
with the reins that he's given, yeah.
Right. And given all the constraints, I'm sure, and just who he is as a public figure. Yeah, I love the guy for that. The other part of your question now, like, what would the elders say? I've talked to a lot of them, and, in the same way that we often caution people, don't see Black people as this Black monolith. Like, we're all the same and we think the same way. There's this incredible spectrum of Black people, right? Well, it's the same with elders, actually.
True.
When I've traveled through South America, some of them are like full blessings. Yes, ayahuasca travels from the forest across the sea. You guys are doing good work. We approve that work and go heal your people. And some other tribes are like, no, you guys have come in and raped and pillaged and stolen our medicine. You don't know what you're doing. So it just depends. I instead would say this, this concept of the Eagle Condor prophecy, which I'm sure you're aware of, the spirit of this prophecy is something that is a kind of an access point, one of the ways I guide my life. For those that don't know, and this is like the Extreme Reader's Digest version, like some 500 years ago, elders and shamans, of communities of indigenous people, started receiving similar visions. They basically kind of foresaw the genocides that were coming in the colonization.
Right.
And they basically said, hey, this terrible time is coming, and it's going to be awful. In fact, some of your souls are going to flee your bodies, hence this concept of soul retrieval. And then they were offered various tools, like the sweat lodge and plant medicines, to kind of get through it. But basically, the prophecy was, they said, don't worry, in 500 years' time, which in theory was around 2012, the eagle and the condor will fly together again. What they're referring to was that the Americas would separate. What they were really referring to is this concept of the heart and the mind, right? Which is exactly what we saw and do see in the world.
Right.
So the condor represents South America,
Right.
the way of the heart, of indigenous ways of the land, right, and intuition. The eagle represents North America, which is the way of the mind, right, and technology.
Yes.
And to some degree, it's like, yeah, those things separated, whether they needed to or not, and went on different trajectories. But now it's pretty clear the only way for humanity to really move forward is to bring together the heart and the mind.
Exactly.
Right? The absolute best of indigenous knowledge and wisdom and cosmology with the best of Western contemporary cosmology and understandings of the world and technology. So that is what is considered the eagle and the condor.
Right.
So I'm committed to that work in my life, right? It's not, instead of looking at what's detrimental about either, it's like, we absolutely do need to bring them together.
Yes.
You know, ayahuasca, plant medicine, psychedelics are technology. You know, plant medicines, our ancestors knew what they were doing. Now that we understand what they were saying, like this idea about healing your ancestors, now we get it. It is, if you look at that through the lens of Western understandings of like mental health and, you know, psychology, you know, everything at this point from epigenetics to, you know, understanding what's happening with neuroplasticity, all of it, you realize like, wow, this is exactly what we're doing. We are bringing like a new contemporary understanding to something that our ancestors knew intuitively and somatically to be true, right? So I'm all about that in my life. It's like, yeah, I'm not interested in spiritual woo-woo.
Yeah.
I'm not interested in following indigenous ways, just, oh, well, the ancestors said so.
Yeah.
Oh, this is the way the tradition is, and you have to like, for me, it's like, why?
Yeah.
And what I mean by why is, what part of that worked? And why were they doing it?
Right.
Why were they doing this particular thing in ceremony? What was the reason behind it?
Context, right.
Yeah, because once we understand that, then we can kind of evolve it, keep it intact, absolutely with absolute respect and bowing down and nodding to the ancestors and indigenous peoples and their knowledge. You know, at the same time, it's like, I want a fuller, deeper understanding of that and also bring it through a Western lens of understanding so that I can be really effective. And the reason is because I've said this many times, for me, the spiritual work for me is a form of activism, actually.
True.
People can call it whatever they want, but in reality, it's like humanity is at this precipice, you know, for the first time ever, although you can say, yeah, there's always been wars and conflict and so forth. Yeah, but we've never had the power to freaking destroy life on this planet, right? So this is new, right? And one of the things that can save us is, well, I would say one of the things that's lost, and I've often said, is at the foundation of all of the confrontations taking place, internal and external in the world, is this loss of connection, which our indigenous people did have. A loss of connection with the cosmos, loss of connection with other people, loss of connection with nature. That is the things that plant medicines, particularly in a ceremonial context, give us back.
True.
Right? So many years ago when I was doing activist work, probably 5 or 6 years after the time that we met, I kind of started moving into that. I just had this realization that, okay, I had the good sense to kind of sit one night and like, why am I doing this? Like, what's my actual motivation, right? And from that, what I really got to is, all right, given what it is that I think I'm doing and what I want to commit myself to, the real front lines of the revolution that needs to happen is in consciousness. It's actually evolving consciousness. And I've been introduced to these tools that help do that. So that's what I'm going to dedicate myself to. So my initial emerging and study into the world of psychedelics and plant medicine was because I wanted to make a friggin' difference, right?
Yeah.
And I just realized that given my natural aptitudes and who I was, this was going to be the place for me that was most effective. Right? So, and of course, along the road and in that, you're also opening yourself up to this incredible mystery school.
Right.
So it deepened my sense of what people are calling spirituality. It deepened my respect and reverence for indigenous people and ancestors and those ways, while at the same time embracing evolution, meaning embracing what is new and our understanding about them and how to apply them, particularly at this moment in history, you know, when we so need it, you know. Like if we don't find a way to bring the heart and the mind together, this ego condor concept, the spirit of it, it's like we're doomed, right? We have to find a way.
Yeah.
Right?
I love that perspective and that answer, the marriage of the heart and the mind.
Yeah.
I always say
what
it
it's
as
all
well.
about.
Yeah. I
This
say
work, I mean.
Exactly. And I always say, I quote a good friend of mine who passed some years ago, but we would talk about this. He would always say, we got to learn to put the mind under the service of the heart.
Absolutely.
And that's when that marriage really becomes an active, tangible, beneficial thing.
And even from a more like either philosophical or spiritual tradition perspective, they would say, we've got to, this concept that we've all heard, like the mind is an incredible servant, but a horrible,
Exactly.
It's a tyrant, right? But not if it's in service to you. Exactly. It's actually saying the same thing. It's like, instead of your ego being in front and your mind being this, this algorithm thing that is like running on a program, that can't stop itself. It's on a treadmill. Yeah, when you tap into the heart, you bring the mind back into service. You become the observer and you realize, I have this incredible tool that has not been of service to me. I've been a slave to it, right? Yeah, it's a whole different perspective and a way of moving in the world.
I call plant medicines entheogenic nootropics.
Yeah, for sure. When they first, quote unquote, discovered, the Western people, ayahuasca, they named it telepathine.
There we go. Oh, wow.
Yeah, because of these telepathic experiences.
Exactly. Yeah.
And I love that story. Not only is that just funny once you understand how ayahuasca works, it was also funny that the indigenous people were like, it actually has a name already?
Yeah. That's beautiful.
Yeah.
Speaking of the name of it, it's just such a, I like to remind people of what it means in its literal sense.
Well, it has many translations, but the most common is kind of like vine of the dead or vine of the soul.
Right.
And the reason for both is because it so consistently causes or inspires spiritual experiences, which more often than not are death experiences.
Right.
Meaning, for Western language, death of the ego.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've had a lot of NDEs as well, near-death experiences on ayahuasca. And there's complete, emulations of the whole process.
And essentially, yours might have been too. They're classically just like the near-death experiences that people describe.
Yeah.
When they've had an accident or something, where they've drowned temporarily, and everything, the white light and the tunnel and all the relatives, whatever it is.
Exactly.
Or sometimes, Graham Hancock did this really interesting study and kind of put forth this hypothesis, or at least he was making the correlation that most of the alien abduction stories that people talk about are actually the exact same experiences that people have with ayahuasca. And it made him wonder, like, maybe people are having these experiences, but they're not happening with like a physical, and I'm not saying there aren't aliens, who knows?
Yeah.
But what he was saying was, which I really resonate with, maybe it's something that's happening in another dimensional.
Right.
And in this context, I like to be really clear. I'm thinking in terms of our mind's ability to tap into different perspectives on reality and just different frequencies. So we can just say interdimensional, right?
Right.
Yeah, you just nailed it. And that's what he was putting forth, and that does seem to be the case. He said, I think when somebody's sitting in their car and they suddenly lose time for however long, and then they come back, right? It may not be that they, quote unquote, physically went anywhere. It's that they just slipped into this alternate, whatever it is, and the interdimensional beings came in and said, by the way, we want to help you with your nervous system here.
Right. Yeah. I've had that experience with ayahuasca.
That's the thing, it happens all the time.
Completely that DMT is the death molecule.
Yeah.
And it's always within us, it's in everything. And there's some moments where we get a serious flush or rush of it. And it can be where, those interdimensional beings show up because of that. And that's the thing that my first ceremony, we had this amazing interdimensional being show up. And it was immediately understood, oh, you're not coming from outer space. You're coming from a whole different inner space.
Yeah, absolutely.
Into this space. It's like, oh, okay. That was my first understanding of that.
Yeah, and a lot of the indigenous ayahuasca traditions, they have different names for these beings that basically show up. They're always benevolent, and they do what feels like surgeries on you.
Yeah.
Or they're like getting your attention and giving you some life-changing advice. So in the Ecuadorian tribe I worked with, they're called the Siakupai. They refer to them as the celestial immortals, and their name for them are the Winupai. but they acknowledge like, we can call them whatever you want, but they basically are these beings, interdimensional beings that show up and surface to you, right? And almost everybody that's done ayahuasca more than a couple of times has had this experience of like, similar to the alien abduction thing. It's like, oh, I was like floating, or I felt like I was on a table, and then these insectoid-like beings, but they were loving, they were benevolent, they're working on you. Working on me. And I had this experience once same, I'd heard about it. Well, this is the cool thing. I hadn't heard about it at the time. I heard about it later. I was at a really, really powerful ceremony. And suddenly I just, kind of like, whoa, and I was in this other place and I felt like I was floating. And these two like, sure enough, insectoid-like looking beings showed up and kind of making these clicking sounds, but I can understand them. And they were like doing their thing. And I remember like, looking up and saying, what are you doing? And they said, we're making room. Right? Wow. And then I started asking questions. And they kind of collectively said, you can ask whatever you want and we'll answer anything you want, but you won't remember it. And I was like, you don't know me very well. So I'm like asking about nature of reality, like, wow. Yeah. And, and I'm like getting all this info and they're doing their thing. And then sure enough, it was kind of like over. And the thing is kind of closing. And I remember I had my pen and paper there and I opened my eyes and didn't remember a damn thing.
Wow.
Yeah.
At least you remember that much.
I remember the experience, but not the answer to the question.
Yeah.
Right? But later, I remember being in the car, and this is why I think why it was so important that it happened this way. I'm very, not only inquisitive, but cautious. Like I've always been somebody, like Brandon, I would say, like, we're not joiners. Meaning I can go anywhere and like, study and see what you're up to, but I'm not like drinking the Kool-Aid, right? I'm not putting on the outfit, right? So I was that way with ayahuasca.
Not joining the cult.
Exactly, I'm not joining. And so I leave the ceremony like you're not supposed to, and it agreed not to. And I go sit in my car, and I remember once I was sitting here like thinking like, okay, if this is real, and you are actually some intelligent thing that I am not, whatever that means, I'm gonna ask some questions that I don't know the answer to. And I sure enough was asking questions about like, later, quantum physics basically. I was asking questions about nature of reality and light. And I remember like moving my hand, it was like going, right? Wow. And this voice was like, well, all reality is like that. It's like, it's actually like, there really only is the present moment. And there's just constant snapshots of reality, So, and now a lot of physicists, particularly Nassim Haramein is saying, he's like, memory, or he says like our experience of time is actually just memory. Yeah. Right? He said there really is only this present moment. And what we see of is like, me arriving here, that's like gone. It doesn't happen anymore, right? He goes, but I have a memory of it. And that's our sense of like time. Exactly. So this thing went on to explain all these different things to me. And then lo and behold, like a month later, I was watching some documentary on quantum physics and I was like, just about everything they were sharing came up to me in that conversation.
Amazing.
Yeah, and I've been hooked ever since. So it's like, I'm somebody who like, amateur studies with enthusiasm, always up to date on whatever's happening in the world of quantum physics because I love it. It is also a mystery school.
I love it. It is. No, I follow it a lot.
Yeah, they're
as well.
also exploring the nature of reality and God, where we came from, how it all works. Yeah. And that's going back to this ego condor thing. It's only in the mind that we have all these separations. These are all. Science is a mystery school. Yeah. Right? They're really exploring the mystery. Yeah. They've come up with what they call the scientific method. Well, indigenous people had one too. Exactly. And by the way, they were arriving at the answers you're arriving at 3,000 years ago.
That's all we can employ is a scientific method, really, no matter where we're, what field that we're in. And I love quantum physics and astrophysics and all the things that deal with, interdimensionality and, the tangible like things that they're studying, like when it comes to the study of light, light particles and even sound, the phonons and how it works with our senses and what we're perceiving, the things that can be perceived beyond just the band that we have access to within the electromagnetic spectrum.
I share this often with people. I mean, just beautiful what you just said. Like, and sometimes people will ask me that do like ayahuasca work, well, is what I'm experiencing real? And I always respond like, well, what is real, right? If you understand how the brain actually works, right, that reality as you know it is a construct inside your head, right? Your brain is picking up on all this information in the room, predictive, right? And it's like, based on everything it knows already, a priori information, it's making up a story about reality. There's no guarantee that although you and I are sitting here talking, the colors and the lights and everything in this room aren't showing up for you the way they are for me. And at the same time, it's this one unified field thing. So they asked that question, I'm like, well, first of all, what is real? The second part is what you just shared about, the spectrum, about like interdimensional beings showing up and so forth. I say, look, you got to keep in mind that our sensors are calibrated for this reality.
Exactly.
In other words, like, we are tuned into this reality. We're designed to perceive it, but the light spectrum goes on infinitely, right, in all directions. So clearly there's a bunch of shit going down that we can't see.
Exactly.
So I like to think of ayahuasca, psychedelics, plant medicine work, depending on which ones and under what circumstances. All they're doing is like tuning you into a different frequency. And like suddenly it's like, oh, I'm picking up on this whole different spectrum of stuff. Right?
I call it the
everything
polishing.
From knowledge to visible phenomenon. Yeah.
I call it the polishing of the lens and the eye's heart.
Yeah. And Michael Pollan, to his credit, I like when he talked about bringing him back in, the reducing valve of consciousness. For people that don't know that, it's like basically there's so much information coming at us right now in this room that your brain would just be overloaded, right?
Exactly.
Trying to like process all of it. So instead what it does is it reduces. It's like, I already know that's a ceiling, I know that's a color gray, I know that's a light, so cancel that out.
Yeah.
All I'm focused on right now is when I need to, which is like you and what you look like in this conversation. He says what happens when you take something like mushrooms, or psychedelics in general, is that reducing valve of reality gets kind of suspended, and suddenly more reality is rushing in, right? And it's why you're suddenly like, oh my God, the color is my hand.
Exactly.
Right?
It's that
It's
default
like,
mode.
well, you should take a moment every day and go, what the hell?
Exactly. Exactly. And the default mode is crucial. It's important.
It is important. There's a function for it.
Yeah.
And we have to make a conscious effort, people that want to, I would say people that quote unquote are on a spiritual path, or anybody that basically is just like I am, just kind of fascinated by the nature of reality. One of the things that really keeps you grounded, I think, and keeps you in the wonder and the beauty of life is to every now and then, whether it's under substance or not, to actually sit still and get real about the fact that you have a hand that evolved over millions of years. That there are all these bones and muscles and technology, like all coming together just so your face can talk. Right?
Yeah.
And when you do that, one of the games I play occasionally, like I'll be out like having lunch, and because I know what the reducing valve is doing, I'll do this thing where I'll say, I'm gonna now start paying attention to everything I'm not paying attention to.
Yeah.
And it's a really mind-blowing, simple thing to do.
Yeah.
Because suddenly I realize, like, there's a billboard there with the thing, there's a crow on top of it. Oh wait, behind that there's just all these things that we're just kind of, your brain is canceling out. You can actually choose to kind of like open that reducing valve, the default, and just let more of reality in. Why would I want to do that? Because it constantly brings you back into the beauty of duality, the beauty of being in the world.
Right. That's very
And
humbling.
you start seeing all these things you didn't notice before.
And it's very humbling.
It's very humbling, right? And humbling, and also like empowering. Yeah, to suddenly see how amazing it is that we're here at all. Right?
True indeed. It gives you that resolve to continue on your path and to fulfill the meaning of your destiny.
Absolutely. Yeah.
That's beautiful.
And whatever that is, even being able to cognize that you have one, and that's where the empowering piece comes in, I think, is to realize that there's just life ahead of you, even not the next day, let alone the rest of your life. And instead of just being in reactive mode, right, to life, it's like you're in this constant state of choosing how reality is going to unfold for you. And some people would say, well, that's just crazy. Reality is just happening. I'm like, yes, and collectively, we're all making it up as we go along.
Right.
And I have a lot of agency over, where I'm choosing to be tomorrow. Like what attitude I have when I wake up in the morning, what I'm putting in my body, who I'm spending time with.
Yeah, beautiful, thank you. So, to wrap it up and in closing, I want to just give you the opportunity to share like what you're doing currently and what you got coming up, and any way people can engage with you and, be in touch.
When I decided to kind of take on what people call the medicine path. I thought for sure one of the things I was giving up was like a quote unquote music career. Prior to that, I thought, this is what I want to do. I want to eventually like make music, and I was doing musical theater at the time. I had stopped that literally right before meeting you, actually, because Living Planet just kind of consumed all the energy. But right before that, I was so immersed into the musical theater world that I got a call one day from this woman, a choreographer who was very well known in LA at the time. And she said, hey, I'm about to mount a European tour of Sophisticated Ladies, which was like a hot show at the time. And she goes, you don't even have to audition. I've seen your work and you'd be right for this part. And I was like, that's it. I'm going to Europe and I'm going to win a Tony Award. It was one of those things, spirit kicked in. It was like, no, you're not. And I just kind of, through a series of events, that call actually prompted me to kind of like start focusing my attention on other things. Within a few years, somewhere in there, the beginnings of Living Planet kind of took hold. So I thought that I was letting go of all of that in the music to do this medicine work. Little did I know the music was going to be a crucial part, as you know, of all like ceremonial, and now psychotherapeutic work as well. I've launched in the last 10 years a really deep study into the power of music as a healing modality in and of itself, the power of music and sound, particularly in concert with ceremony.
Beautiful.
Yeah. So my focus now, is recording music, and there's this genre of music now called medicine music. I push the boundaries of that, of course, just because of who I am. Much more soulful, electronic, rhythmic.
Soulful-ceremonialist.
Pretty much, yeah. But all the lyrics and the song's origins are coming out of ceremony, and more often than not, they're being designed for that space. So I'm mostly focused on that these days.
Beautiful.
Yeah, and within the ceremonies that I have the opportunity to lead or be a part of, that's my main contribution. It's kind of bringing the medicine music in.
Have you heard of the Opus sound bed?
Yeah.
I just got it in the mail today.
Oh, really?
Got the notification, finally.
I saw it just recently on Instagram, and I was like, okay, there's a lot of used vacuum cleaners out in the market, but that looks really good.
Right, yeah. I can't wait to get home and check it out, but I'm
Cool.
really a proponent as well.
You have to let me know, because I was
sound
actually
healing
curious
therapy.
about it myself.
I'll let you know, yeah. It's definitely crucial.
Nice, cool.
And so you want to share any songs?
Yeah, I'll just share it.
music?
So because it was cool, it's funny, you sent me a text saying, bring some instruments, and I laughed because they're always in my car.
Beautiful.
Well, they have to be.
Yes.
So it was like a no-brainer.
Yes.
Yeah, just give you an example, there's more the contemporary kind of medicine songs that happen in ceremony. We're talking about this idea of like Eagle Condor, and me understanding and bringing to the ceremony space the understanding of the power of rhythm, music, tone, all of that, cadence, with the intention of what's being sung. So in every ceremony, it's my animal totem there, burn out. So in every ceremony, there's a moment when we dedicate the ceremony to the ancestors. Just kind of bring people into the awareness of that being a possibility. And the invocation for that is this is one of the songs that I share. Ancestors, I'm calling to the ancestors. Ancestors, calling in the ancestors to walk with us, speak with us, pray with us, heal with us, illuminate our hearts, illuminate our minds, illuminate our path as we walk upon this road every day, healing all our DNA. Example.
Beautiful.
Yeah, so taking the indigenous rhythm, this would be a more Native American, but all shamanic cultures have the drum, this particular type of drum, and invoking the ancestors. The eagle, part of that eagle condor, is that I'm very specifically bringing in the idea that we can heal our DNA.
Yes, of course. So beautiful.
And then the kind of updated version of that is the frame drum for me, which I'm kind of most known for. So also a frame drum. A frame drum is any drum that the head is much wider than the width of the drum. There's many. A tambourine is also a frame drum.
Okay, right.
Right. And this is the one, as I mentioned earlier, that was introduced to us through Lane Redmond. You know, and I've since, of course, made it my own. And so songs like that, when we record, evolve into one of the more popular ones I have on the Birds in Paradise album. What I love about this drum is that you can sing into it.
Love that.
We travel far to find this place where weary souls they find a warm embrace. We travel far to find this place where weary souls they find a warm embrace. And all our love, it comes from this place. Yeah, I love this drum. And then I always go to the middle and then everybody gets down. And doesn't this, and doesn't this, and doesn't this, and doesn't this, and this. That means I'm calling this, and I'm calling this, and invoking this, and inviting this, and this, all divine beings this, our Jesus Christo this, Hare Krishna this, Lord Buddha this, and this, Yemanjan. That just goes on and on and on. Yeah, as an invocation. And again, the beauty is everyone in ayahuasca or any psychotherapeutic kind of ceremonial space, the thing that's beautiful is the mind and consciousness is open, like willingly so. And you want to be very mindful of what you're inserting into that space.
Yes.
The power of suggestion is huge.
Of course.
And the drum is kind of bringing us into this group entrainment. Yeah, so just bringing up the archetypes, whether people see them as actual spiritual beings or just archetypally what they represent.
Yeah.
In that invocation, in the opening, that's what I'm doing. It's like,
that.
yeah, bringing in the teachings and the symbols and what it is, whatever these beings mean to you, like we're bringing that into the ceremony space.
That's powerful.
Yeah.
Very
And then
effective.
lastly, you can put that over there. So I don't like to drop it. So the Hong drum, back in the day, this was like a really obscure, like exotic thing that everybody was looking for. Now they're everywhere, which is also beautiful.
Love those.
Yeah, the Hong drum. Well, I went down to that river to pray. I went down to that river to pray. Ocean. And I prayed, I prayed all day, ocean. And I prayed, I prayed all day, ocean. I took a day, ocean. I took a day, ocean. Forever grateful, ocean. Forever grateful, grateful to love that ocean. There you go.
Thank you so much. That's so beautiful. I love that.
Yeah, it's been, I think the thing that I'm most probably pleased with and grateful for in my life through the plant medicine work is that it allowed me to bring all the parts of myself that are most intrinsic and unique to me including we bring the mother full circle. Yeah, the musical sensibility and talent that I got from my mother, my love for that, my understanding of what music is doing in the space, um, and just the transformative technology that ayahuasca and plant medicines are in and of themselves. Yeah, and I get to merge all of that into this like one beautiful expression. Yeah,
Yes.
so it's, uh, people often ask me like, "What? How's it like doing that?" It's like for a living. I'm like, it's the best job in the world.
Well, thank you so much for all that you do,
Absolutely. Yeah.
all that you've done, how you've impacted my life until now, many years later, coming back full circle. It is such a beautiful thing. It's, it amazes me because, we have people in life that come and go. We have people that have, they dip their toes in certain things and they bring forth certain aspects that influence you. And you see them, they go throughout their lives, they change, things happen, and
Yeah.
you lose touch or whatever. But you've been one of those consistent, like real, like for me, a lineage holder of somebody that's connected in into a current that I can always think about and come back to and
That's
connect with.
beautiful.
And it's
Yeah.
like, wow, like you really mean a lot to this planet.
And this idea of like standing on the shoulders of giants, uh, not only my contemporary elders, like it's Sunday and Miranda, it's like
Yeah.
dear friends that quite literally shaped who I was, but in addition to like my parents, I met like Russell, who we talked about, who was like the person that showed up, the mentor for me. And the last thing I will say is, I think the most important thing that happened to me that I transferred to other people, and I think that elders can do, is simply seeing you, right? Yeah. Uh, when Russell met me, the experience was somebody actually saw who I was, right? And cared enough about that to kind of want to like, I'm going to bring that out. Like
Yeah.
this is for the world.
Beautiful.
And I find that's what we all do for each other. And as a quote unquote elder, that's the only thing I'm really focused on with the young people in my life. It's like letting them know that they're being seen, right? And the one I'm holding at all times is a space for the highest potential of you to emerge.
Beautiful.
Yeah, and because that's for the world.
Thank you so much. Well, let our people know how they can contact you, how they can be in touch and follow everything you're doing.
Oh, good. Oh, so yeah, I have a website that I don't pay as much attention to as I should. However, it's just my name, tonymoss.me.
Nice.
And I basically use it to kind of put up everything that I've either done or is coming up when I remember to do so.
Nice.
Yeah, and all the music links are there too.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you'll be able to follow my page as well, at Alchemitic, and also at Entheogenic Roots Doc on Instagram. And you'll see all the links and all the things. You can just, stay tuned. We'll be continuing with this non-performative conscious media journalism, just to help, uplift our voices and what's going on in this field. And once again, thank you so much, Tony, for being here. And continue to shine and radiate all the light.
You and you.
Thank you so much.
My name is Light.